But tonight it hit like a storm. Plates clattered, conversations merged into a single chaotic hum, and the scent of grilled shrimp mingled with the ocean breeze drifting through the cracked windows. Amid it all, Emma Reyes moved with quiet determination, weaving between tables like a dancer locked in a rhythm only she could hear. Her coworkers often joked that she was born in this restaurant, and sometimes she believed them. After her mother passed away, the lantern had become more than a job. It was her lifeline, the one place where she felt she still had a purpose. Tonight was supposed to be just another shift. No surprises, no drama, just hard work, tips, and enough money to keep the lights on at home. But as the bell over the door chimed and a man in a tailored charcoal suit stepped inside, she felt the air change, subtly but unmistakably. He was the kind of man who didn't just walk into a room, he claimed it. His confidence was almost tangible, radiating off him like heat from asphalt on a summer day. His watch gleamed under the lantern lights. His shoes were polished enough to reflect the hardwood floor. His smile was sharp, practiced, and entirely devoid of warmth. Emma had seen his type before, overconfident, entitled, powerful. Men who believed the world was something to purchase. Men raised on privilege and convinced it was a virtue. But she took a breath, steadied herself, and approached his table with the professional calm she'd perfected over the years. "Good evening," she said, offering her usual gentle smile. "Welcome to the Harbor Lantern. Can I get you started with?" "Just bring me your best bourbon," he interrupted without looking up from his phone. "And make it fast." She nodded and walked away, refusing to let irritation settle. People had bad days. People were rude. People forgot basic decency when they had too much money and too little humility. It wasn't her job to fix them. But as the night unfolded, she realized that this man wasn't simply rude. There was something beneath his polished surface, an emptiness that looked like hunger but wasn't for food. When he finished his drink, he waved her over with two fingers, dismissive, impatient. "Sit," he ordered. Emma blinked. "I'm working, sir." "Oh, come on." He finally looked up, eyes narrowing in the way men study things they believe belong to them. "Everyone needs a break. I'm sure you could use one." She stood straighter. "Is there something else you'd like to order?" "Yeah," he said, leaning back with a slow smirk. "I'd like to buy your time. Just one date. You pick the place. Name your price." The restaurant noise seemed to fade. For a moment, all Emma heard was the rush of her own heartbeat. He wasn't joking. His voice held a confidence so absolute it felt suffocating. "Sir," she said softly, "I'm not for sale." He scoffed, reached into his wallet, and pulled out a thick stack of bills. With a flick of his wrist, he slapped them onto the table. The sound cracked through the room like a whip. Heads turned. Conversations paused. "There," he said. "That should cover it." Emma felt heat rising in her face. Not the warmth of embarrassment, but the sting of humiliation. She stared at the pile of money, at the man who thought it was acceptable to slap it in her direction like she was a product on a shelf. "I said no," she whispered. The man's smile tightened. "Look, sweetheart, everyone has a price. Don't make this difficult." Emma felt her throat tighten as the room fell into an uneasy silence. Then, a low, rumbling growl cut through the tension. She turned as a large military dog, muscular, alert, black and tan, strode toward the table, positioning himself between her and the man. By his side stood a man in a simple navy jacket, jeans, and boots. Not flashy, not polished, but unmistakably formidable. His gaze was calm but carried the weight of someone who'd seen far worse than the arrogance unfolding before him. His presence alone was enough to still the air. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, voice steady as stone. The billionaire, Nathan Locke, as Emma later learned, rolled his eyes. "Oh, for God's sake, what are you supposed to be?" "Security. This is between me and the lady." The newcomer didn't move. His dog stayed perfectly still, though the growl simmered beneath the surface like a warning from the earth itself. "It doesn't look like she wants it to be," he said quietly. Nathan's irritation flared. "And who the hell are you?" The man extended a hand toward Emma, not touching her, but close enough to offer support without forcing it. "Name's Jack Mercer," he said. U.S. Navy SEAL, retired." He nodded toward the dog. "And that's Ranger." He doesn't like bullies. Ranger let out another soft growl, as if agreeing. Snickers traveled through the restaurant. People pretended not to watch, but every pair of eyes was locked on the unfolding scene. Emma felt something shift inside her. Relief, gratitude, and something warmer she didn't dare name. Nathan glared at Jack. This is ridiculous. I was making her an offer. A generous one. It wasn't an offer, Jack replied. It was an insult. Nathan's jaw clenched, but Jack stepped closer. Not threatening, not aggressive, just present, unshakable. The kind of presence that makes arrogant men shrink without noticing their own retreat. Pick up your money, Jack said softly. Apologize. And walk away. Nathan sputtered. Are you out of your mind? Do you have any idea who I am? Jack didn't blink. Do you know who you're choosing to be? The question hung between them like a mirror. Nathan stared into Jack's steady gaze, searching for an angle, an edge, a crack. But there was none, only conviction. Finally, Nathan shoved back his chair, snatched the money from the table, and stormed toward the exit without another word. The door slammed behind him. Silence hovered for a long moment before the restaurant exhaled in unison. Emma pressed a hand to her chest, trying to steady her breath. Jack turned to her with gentle eyes. You okay? He asked. She nodded, though her voice trembled when she spoke. Thank you. I didn't expect anyone to step in like that. Jack offered a humble shrug. Wasn't right. Someone had to. Ranger nudged her hand, and she let out a surprised laugh, scratching behind his ears. His tail thumped softly. You're a hero, she said. Jack shook his head. Just a guy who happened to be here. But that wasn't true. She sensed it in the way he stood, the steadiness in his posture, the patience in his gaze. This wasn't the first time he'd stepped into a difficult situation. And something told her it wouldn't be the last. As the night returned to normal, Jack sat at a corner table with Ranger stretched out at his feet. Emma insisted on bringing him a meal on the house, though he protested. When she set the plate down, he smiled in a way that made her heart ache. A small, genuine curve of gratitude, the kind rarely given by men like Nathan. You didn't have to do that, he said. She took a slow breath. Neither did you. They talked, slowly at first, then with the easy rhythm of two people who had unexpectedly found safety in each other's presence. Jack told her Ranger was his service dog, trained not just for missions but for healing, for the quiet moments after the battlefield when silence became its own kind of enemy. Emma listened, absorbing every detail. She told him about her mother, about the bills piling up at home, about feeling stuck between survival and hope. Jack listened just as intently. When the shift ended, Jack walked her to the parking lot, Ranger padding at their side. The moon reflected off the ocean, casting silver light across the pavement. Emma wrapped her arms around herself against the chill. You know, Jack said softly, what happened tonight wasn't your fault. She nodded but didn't speak. The humiliation still lingered, like a bruise beneath the skin. Jack continued, there's a difference between being strong and being unbreakable. You're strong. Strong enough to stand your ground. That matters. His voice carried a sincerity that touched something deep inside her. Sometimes, she whispered, I don't feel strong. Jack smiled gently. Strong people rarely do. Ranger nudged her hand again, and without thinking, she knelt beside him. The dog placed his head against her shoulder, and something inside her cracked open. Something tired, something vulnerable, something longing to be understood. A tear slipped down her cheek, surprising her. She wiped it quickly, embarrassed. Sorry, she murmured. Jack crouched beside her. Don't be. For a long moment, the three of them stayed like that. The waitress who refused to be bought, the seal who refused to let her stand alone, and the dog who carried the hearts of them both with quiet grace. In the days that followed, the story spread throughout the small coastal town. Not the part about the billionaire's tantrum, but the part where a stranger saw a woman's worth without needing a price tag. Customers left bigger tips. Coworkers asked if she was okay. And every evening, Jack and Ranger returned, not to rescue her, but simply to be there. They sat in their corner booth. Jack read while Ranger laid his head on Emma's feet whenever she paused to talk. They laughed, shared stories, found comfort in each other's presence. Slowly, Emma's world shifted. She wasn't alone anymore. One quiet Sunday evening, after closing, Jack walked her to her car again. The stars were bright, the air crisp, and the ocean whispered against the docks in the distance. "You know," Jack said softly, "you don't deserve what happened that night." "I know," she replied. "But I think, maybe it led to something good." Jack met her eyes, uncertainty flickering beneath his calm exterior. "Yeah, maybe it did." She took a breath. "Why do you come here every night?" He hesitated, then gave a soft, vulnerable smile. "Because this place feels like a reminder that good things still exist. People, kindness, conversation, and me," she whispered. Jack swallowed. "Yeah," he said quietly. "You too." Ranger barked once, as if nudging him toward honesty. Emma laughed. "Your dog is not subtle." "He never is." They stood inches apart, the night holding its breath. But she didn't step closer, and neither did he. Their connection wasn't something that needed rushing. It was something being built with patience, respect, and understanding. A week later, Emma received a letter. No name, no return address. Inside was a check, large enough to pay off her mother's medical debt, cover her rent, and give her breathing room for the first time in years. A simple note accompanied it. "I was wrong. I'm trying to be better." No signature, but she knew who it was. Nathan Locke had realized something. Maybe because of Jack, maybe because of Ranger, maybe because deep down, he wanted to be a better man. Emma didn't forgive him, but she appreciated the gesture, the acknowledgement that money couldn't buy respect, but humility could begin to restore it. When she told Jack about the letter, he exhaled slowly. "People can change," he said. "Sometimes it just takes being confronted with who they've become." Emma nodded. "You did that." Jack shook his head. "No, he did. I just held up the mirror." Over time, the bond between Emma, Jack, and Ranger deepened. Gently, naturally, without pressure or expectation. They weren't saving each other. They were simply walking alongside one another toward something brighter. One evening, months later, as they stood together on the pier watching the sunset bleed into the horizon, Emma felt a profound stillness settle inside her. The kind that comes not from the absence of pain, but from the presence of hope. Jack stood beside her, hands in his pockets, Ranger leaning against his leg. "You know," Emma murmured, "when he slapped that money down, I felt small. Like my whole life was something people could just toss away." Jack looked at her, eyes soft. "You're not small. You're extraordinary." She smiled, eyes shining. "Because you stepped in." He shook his head. "Because you stood your ground." Emma reached down to scratch Ranger's ears. "And because of you," she added softly, looking up at Jack, "I remembered I deserved better." Jack's voice was barely above a whisper. "You always did." A warm breeze swept across the pier. The golden light wrapped around them, gentle and forgiving. For the first time in a long time, Emma let herself believe that her future could be something beautiful. Something chosen. Something earned not by money, but by kindness, courage, and connection. Jack slipped his hand into hers, not possessive, not demanding, but steady. She leaned into him, letting her heart rest in the quiet certainty of the moment. Beside them, Ranger sighed contentedly, as if he had known all along that this was where they belonged. In that peaceful silence, Emma realized something profound. Sometimes the people who change your life aren't the ones with power or wealth, but the ones who carry compassion like a lantern in the dark, lighting the path not only for themselves, but for anyone brave enough to walk beside them. And sometimes, that small act of stepping in, whether with a growl, a steady voice, or an open hand, is enough to change everything.